So this is Getting and Organising Gigs. I've got some great panellists with me, and I'll get them to introduce themselves just now. Paul, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name's Paul. Hello. And I'm 1/3 of a collective that I run called High Rise Records, where we sort of promote events for other artists in Glasgow and release music together, essentially. Yeah.
My name is Eilidh, and I am the music programmer for St Luke's and the Wing Docks in Glasgow. So we are a 600 capacity multi-arts venue, and we also do corporate, wedding, everything really. And yeah, that's my job, that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I work for 432 Presents in Glasgow as a booker and assistant promoter. I programme the Hug and Pint, which is a 120 capacity venue in Glasgow, and work on shows at a bigger level all across Glasgow and Edinburgh and the rest of Scotland as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. And there's a lot to get through in this session, and we don't have a lot of time, so we will try and touch on as much as possible. But I guess I'll get Eilidh and Lizzie to just give a quick summary of what your job actually involves for anyone who wants to move into that.
There's so many parts of our job.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's just, it really, from kind of the initial inquiry of whether it's a promoter, so Lizzie, I email Lizzie pretty much every single day, whether it's getting emails to pencil in dates in our diary, placing challenges for dates, and then securing the dates. I then put events on sale, monitor the ticketing, update allocations, holds to make sure we don't oversell any gigs. And then on the night of a show, I'm essentially running the show and making sure it all goes smooth, there's no issues, no problems, whilst programming the venue, so to make sure that we kind of maximise like profits, but also making sure that our programme is really cool and engaging for local people and like wider Glasgow residents.
Yeah, I think Eilidh's touched on a lot of it. On my part, there's a lot of admin to it in terms of putting shows together. There's far more admin than you would ever imagine. A lot of Google Calendars, a lot of going out, and an agent will come to us with a show that they're putting on, a lot of going out and gathering avails, so speaking to multiple venues, likes of Eilidh, multiple other options, gathering day options, and then putting together show costings for budgets. And then I also do a lot of local programming at the Hug and Pint on a smaller level as well, so that's like sort of local showcase stuff, listening and speaking to new bands, finding shows that might suit them, the likes of support slots and local small bill events and things like that, right up to the bigger level stuff. So yeah, it's good.
It's funny because we kind of do the same thing, but we're opposite sides of the table, if that makes sense, as like a promoter and then a venue. I think we do a lot of the same thing. It's just different kind of aspects of viewing it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Totally. I mean, hearing that, I think from my level, it's a far more sort of like independent, if that's the word. You know, a lot of the things that we do really come from like our own ideas of what we want to see in the city, like what artists we want to put on, and it's really a case of maybe like contacting people like yourselves, being like, could we book your venue? And yeah, go from there really.
Fantastic. What advice, or what should acts and artists and musicians do or have prepared if they want to come and play a show, I guess, at your venue, or if they contact you as a promoter to put on a show? You can all answer this from various different hats, but if someone's contacting you for a show, what do you want to see?
So, I mean, I think it's a case of, I mean, you all know the important thing to do is to go out and speak to people, contact people, get in touch with promoters. Goes without saying. I think what's really helpful for me is when people are prepared. Obvious things, make sure you've got some music to send us, make sure you tell me what your band's called. You would be really surprised the amount of times that people email me and just say, can I play a show, and nothing else, no information. So I would really like to know what you sound like, if you've got any links, if you can tell me what you might have played in the past, if you've played anything in the past, if you've done your research, if you've gone through a promoter's listings, you see what gigs they've got coming up. You feel free, if you see something they're putting on you would like to be put forward for a support slot, mention that. Even if the promoter can't get you on that slot, it'll go a long way in helping them know what other kind of shows you might suit. So yeah, that's probably the main things.
Yeah, add all of your information and make it as easy as possible for us. We are inundated with kind of emails, and every day I go into work, if we were talking about this earlier, if we have under 100 emails that we need to respond to that day, that's a good day. That's like an easy day. You're so busy and you're always working, so you can't put a lot of time into those just general inquiries, because I have like big promoters or artists who need really specific information that day. It's time sensitive, so make it as easy for us to get all of your details like as possible.
Yeah, I think if you are an artist looking to contact a promoter to do a show, your proposition should be well researched. You should be able to provide all the details that promoter would need, and have enough music to play as well. I have a lot of contacts from artists that are looking to do shows for like our new night called For Another World, and they don't realize often how long we would expect an artist to play, minimum like 20 minutes. So you would at least need that much music in your bank, whether it's released or not. I would feel like 20 minutes to 30 minutes is how much you should have prepared in order to perform, essentially.
So I guess the main part for every artist is fees and payment from shows. I guess, again, you can come at it from different angles. What should a kind of grassroots level artist be expecting or looking to be paid for a support slot and versus a headline show at a smaller grassroots venue?
So I guess I'll talk about it from a venue standpoint, because most of like the shows that I put on and that we do, we base that off something that's called a venue hire. And it's a venue hire deal. So what that means is people are coming to me and I essentially say to them, you have the room hire cost, you plus your PRS and you plus your VAT. Inclusive of that, you get a sound tech, you get a lighting engineer, and you get staffing throughout the full building that we have. And that's how most of our kind of deals are done. So like when I'm dealing with Lizzie and Daniel over at 432, they'll book in with us, and at the end of a show, I'll create what's called a settlement. And that's like kind of how all the money's done from a venue standpoint. It's very different if you are an artist and you're working directly with the promoter. So I'll pass over to Lizzie to explain kind of your guarantee versus split.
Yeah, so it's totally, I mean, it varies from show to show. It really depends what you're playing. For the likes of like a support slot, it'll typically be a flat fee, and as there's always a show budget we have to work off that's agreed between the agent of the headline act and ourselves. And we are restricted sometimes by whatever's budgeted into that for support, which can be, for smaller level shows, £50 to £100. Another sort of system you'll probably come across with smaller shows is a ticket split deal, where your fee can increase based on how many tickets you sell. In my case, the way that I book shows, there's always a minimum guarantee there. So you'll have an allocation of, say, 20 tickets, and you will get 60% of the sales of those tickets, but it's always backed up by a minimum fee. So you'll have a minimum of, say, £50, and if you don't sell enough to break that, past that, you will always have that to fall back on. We don't have anyone playing for free or paying to play.
Could you explain what paying to play is?
Yeah, so pay to play there are some promoters out there who book bands on the basis of you pay for a slot on a bill, which
Not cool.
Yeah, I don't believe anybody should be doing that. You're worth far more than that. You're putting in a lot of time and effort to make music and play a show. It's quite a dodgy way of doing things. So I would, if anybody asks you to, I would recommend you're wary of it and you steer clear.
Yeah, say no. Say no.
I suppose hearing what you guys say is actually very interesting, because from our sort of ground level, being very independent, I think the budget that we work with will often determine how much an artist could potentially get paid for a show that we put on. And we often have to be sort of realistic about how much money we can allocate for an artist and stuff, and often we can't pay artists at an ideal sort of rate, being like, I think £75 is like the standard union fee. So often artists are like maybe like underpaid, like 50 quid for like a 20-minute set, 30-minute set, which isn't ideal, but I've been there before for stuff that I've performed for. And I feel like it's a case of trying to, on a smaller level specifically, because when you get higher, I think it's well within your right to negotiate or come to some sort of term where there's a fair pay. But when you're starting off, there's other things that I feel like promoters can offer that isn't just money. I think filming the performance for the artist is just as, well, not just as valuable, is very valuable, because it gives the artist content that they can use for themselves to promote maybe a next show or their project or whatever. I think videoing, taking photographs and having that sort of media to use is valuable. And yeah, I think coming to terms with what type of pay would suit you is important to think about.
Amazing. So you're an artist, you've booked the show, the gig's booked. What's next? For example, tech requirements, sound engineers, letting people know, promo, etc.
Yeah, sure. So typically the process that I would follow is by getting the requirements of the artist, what they're going to need, tech specs and stuff, and getting their music ready, understanding how they're going to play their music. So we work with a lot of hip-hop artists, so it's essentially just a microphone that they're going to need and some way to play their music, typically through a laptop or some DJ's decks. So that would be a USB. So importantly, having your music ready and having it on a USB, or ideally sent over before to whoever's going to be playing your music, whether that be your DJ or the promoter themselves, whether they have someone arranged for that. And yeah, just being prepared for the show, rehearsing, and yeah, getting ready for your performance.
Also, make sure that what you're bringing is compatible with the venue you're playing in. If you have a promoter, 9 times out of 10, they'll kind of do all the intricate work with the advancing of the show. So you will tell the promoter, okay, I'm in this band and we've got this equipment, this. These are our requirements. And then the promoter, the advancer of the show, will come to me at the venue and I'll tie them in with our lead sound tech. And basically what he does is he goes through the advance with like his technical glasses on and says, we are compatible, so this show, everything can kind of run smoothly for the show. If you're booking it yourself, so if you're coming directly to me as an artist and there's no promoter, you have to make sure that the equipment that we have in-house is going to be okay for what you need, essentially, and or then go out and hire what it is that we don't have in-house.
Yeah, something Eilidh's touched upon is a show advance, which is pretty standard for most promoted shows. We have a production team who will, if your band is booked, our production team will reach out to you guys, ask all the sort of important questions, everything from what's your tech spec, any accessibility requirements, how many people are in the party, and yeah, put all that information together for you. They'll let you know what's there at the venue for you to use, if anything. Sometimes a venue will have some backline, sometimes it won't. It's a case of making sure you've got things like drum breakables. A venue will rarely ever provide. You're expected to bring those yourselves. A lot of time you can be proactive and reach out to other bands in the lineup. If you know there are other bands in the lineup, a lot of times there's like a backline share. You can share amps between different acts. That's fairly standard. Yeah, just being proactive, reaching out to make sure that you're not scrambling last minute on the day for like an amp that you need and don't have.
Something I'd like to add actually is the way your especially with USBs, the way that your songs and your tracks are formatted. I've often found that WAV files, which are more processed, aren't compatible with like some CDJs or DJ decks. So I'll come to like a radio and like it's all in waves and I can't play my music. So MP3 is usually the best format for USB to DJ decks, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, compatibility is really, really important. It's something that you should really triple check before you come out on the day of your show, but also making sure that your tech spec is kind of up to industry standard. I know it's hard when you're starting out, you might not know what to include, but don't be super basic in that it's just we have one singer, one bass, one guitar, one this. Really give the tech team all of the information that they're going to require so that there's not a lot of back and forth, because as smooth as it can be made, the better it is for the show and for the show to go ahead, you know?
Amazing. So I guess looking at it from whether you're working with a promoter or a venue directly, you're booking your own shows, what are just some common mistakes to avoid? I know we've touched on tech setup, but any other mistakes to avoid?
I guess tell people you're playing the show. It's really important if you want people to come. Promoters and venues will notice if you're able to bring a really good turnout to your show. That goes a long way, contributes to you potentially being booked again. So just if you get that slot that you're really looking forward to, just shout about it as much as possible. Don't be quiet about it. Don't oversaturate. Don't play every. I mean, you can if you want, but there's value in not playing every single show you're offered. Because then you're kind of oversaturating yourself, and you've got less pull every time you play if people know that they can see you again 3 days later.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely being prepared for. What was it that you said there about? You started off saying that. Yeah, the lights are super bright all of a sudden. No, basically, I think it's important. Common mistake is promoters are often expected to promote the artist and promote the show, rightfully so. But often I don't see a lot of artists promoting their show themselves. And I think that's really important for the artist to do because, I mean, for example, say your Instagram. The people that follow you on your Instagram is your audience. The people that follow the promoter's Instagram, for example, aren't the same people. So us promoting the show on our side is one thing, but it's equally important that the artist promotes the show on their side because, you know, that whoever's looking at you is likely to come to the show, more likely to come to the show for sure.
Yeah, and also just as a follow-up, if you're kind of new and you're starting out and you get offered shows, I feel it feels very obvious for me to say, but when you arrive at the venue, be professional. You know, if this is what you're really wanting to do, show the venue and show the promoter that you are serious about it. There's been so many times where I've seen support bands kind of behave in a way that is negative, and we all talk. You know what I mean? We, as an industry, we all know each other. It's not a very big industry, and so make sure that from the minute you arrive, you're like your head is in the game and that you're doing the best you possibly can to put your best self forward, because that is going to be received really, really well, and it'll carry you far, you know.
Amazing. So we're on to sort of kind of promoting your own show, and I guess this comes from a really sort of grassroots level, from I guess like a venue the size of Sneaky Pete's or Broadcast or something like that. Just from the ground up, if an artist contacts a venue that size to kind of book their own show from that level, how do they do it? Just to really reiterate the point, how do they do it? And so like contacting other artists and creating that sort of community collective around gigs and things like that, and trying to build it from the ground up from a very basic level.
Yeah, that's really hard because for me, like the venue I work at, we're 600 capacity, right? So I have to be very selective when it comes to the things that I'm booking from like the venue. So when we're not working with a promoter, so kind of that grassroots music question. I guess Paul, you'd probably be the best one to answer that. Being like,
yeah. So I mean, how to go about it really is that. So how to go about it is, so starting off, you want to really think about how many tickets you could potentially sell, how many people could potentially come to your show. That will help decide what venue you're looking to do. I would suggest for new artists to really look for like a really small venue so that you could pack it out and then it will look really good and you'll have a great show. That's really difficult to find though. There isn't that many venues that are like under 80 capacity. There's only really like 2 I can think of off the top of my head. And yeah, it's a case of booking, it's a case of contacting their venue booker. you would usually go to just search the venue's website, and often they'll have like an email, or sometimes you have to go into the venue and ask for their contact email. I know that the old hairdressers in Glasgow, there isn't like an email contact on their website or anything. You have to go in there and ask for the booker's email. And then from there on, you would email them saying that you're looking to do a show, explaining what type of show it would be, giving them all the details, when, what time, and really how you would like it set up. And yeah, often I'll get replies like what are the acts, what are the lineup. I think a lot of bookers would like to know that, because I'm sure it coincides with whether it's the right type of show for that venue and so on. So being able to provide that is also important. So links of music as well is good. Doesn't really have to be sort of like description or anything like that, but like links of music, videos of performances is ideal, but this is often not the case. So I wouldn't really worry about that all the time. Just really trying to make a contact and a good impression, really, because it's also building a relationship with that booker. Once you have that relationship, then I suppose there's a lot more trust, and you can hopefully do more shows there, and so on and so forth.
You can all come back into this one now. So ticketing, I guess it's just ticketing platforms that are available, obviously more geared towards smaller artists, and kind of where to sell them, and whether people still do printed tickets and whether it's cool or not.
So we actually did printed tickets for our last show, and the point of that was to sort of treat them as like leaflets. So we wanted to go out into town and literally stop people in the street and be like, hey, you look like you'd like to come to the show. Here's a ticket. If you come up into the night, you can get it for free. I mean, cheaper, sorry, not free. So yeah, I think it's about like what style of marketing you're going to go after, really, because that was a particular style of marketing where we would be like stopping people and having a conversation with them and having that interaction, which is maybe something that you don't always get on social media and so on. Yeah.
I wish they still did physicals. I wish that was still, very rarely do we see them. Ticket Scotland they'll always have a little stack of tickets, which is really, really cool. Because I used to collect them all, and now it's all e-tickets and it's all online. So yeah, it's a real shame they don't do them anymore. Most places, most
I know,
companies.
I miss them too. Yeah, in terms of what ticketing platforms to use, there's lots of options out there. Most promoters will have a deal. They'll sell through multiple different ticket outlets, but typically have a deal with one. 432 uses C tickets primarily. I know St Luke's for their venue allocation use TicketWeb.
Yeah.
Those are companies you can reach out to and talk to about selling independently. Things like Eventbrite are really good for like a small capacity show that you're just running yourself. Music Glue is also pretty good.
Also got Universe.
Yeah.
Universe is a good one, as is Skiddle, although I don't know if you have to have a tie with them. But they seem good too.
I use Humanitics, and like all their profits go to charity, which is pretty cool. And they've got a nice wee neat app, so I can scan everybody's tickets when they come in. So it's good.
A major thing I would say, and this might sound obvious, but make sure if you're putting a DIY show on yourself, make sure you know the capacity of the venue, and make sure you are capping the sales at that. Because if there's one way to upset a venue, it's by overselling a show.
Don't do it, man. Don't do it. It's a nightmare if that happens, and it's a very stressful situation. So never ever oversell. Even though there is always a drop off, you cannot guarantee that for every single show, because sometimes there will be a show where all 600 people will show up. So do not go above that. Make sure you're including your guest list and or your artist holds within the capacity of the venue, and do not add them as separate, because a lot of people think you can basically add them on as an additional extra. They don't count. No, they do count. Capacity is really serious, and venues have to take that very serious, because obviously if you have more than what you can legally fit in the venue, that's not on. So yeah, don't oversell.
Also check venues' age restrictions for shows as well. Double check in advance before you put it on sale, and then all your pals turn up and can't get in.
Same with curfew. Double check the curfew time, because there's so many times where a gig will be going and I'll be like looking at my watch like, oh, we're nearly at time. It's like our curfew is there, and there's nothing worse than kind of having to signal to the front of house, you know, lights up now. Like we have to pull this. Make sure that you know your curfew times.
On the topic of curfews as well, a lot of Edinburgh venues have very strict curfews, primarily because they also run club nights. So if you are doing an independent show in a venue and you want to meet people or sell merch after the show, factor that into your show times, because the security will just yeet you out the venue when curfew hits. So general advice for gigs. What other avenues can artists look at? I've just kind of touched a little bit on it. Through their shows to kind of make extra money as well as the show itself. I guess I'll go to Paul first on this.
Merch is a good one. I don't really see it too often, but it should be used more. And merch doesn't have to be T-shirts or anything like that. It could really be anything, you know. So coming up with creative ways of doing that. I think an idea that I had myself was it was T-shirts, but it was to print flowers onto T-shirts. So it's very cheap, you know, and it's not going to cost me a lot, and I can just sell them after the show. I think that the importance of that is it helps create sort of something for the audience a memento to keep. A lot of people will take our posters home and stick them up on their wall. I used to do that when I was younger and went to gigs, so anything like that. The tickets that we had for our last show, we had so many of them that we just started handing them out, and people loved taking them to take home as just as a memento.
Yeah, I think merch is the most obvious one. I think right across the board, from small grassroots artists right up to large touring artists, merch is a huge way to sort of supplement income. And it's another way that you can be really creative. Interesting merch is good marketing. Doesn't have to be just T-shirts, like you say. We had an act at the Hug and Pint once who were selling branded spice mix. It was like a curry powder mix or something that they had like branded with their own band name. And I still remember it. I think it's mental, but I still remember it, and that's good marketing. People are going to talk about that.
Yeah, and people, if you make it memorable as well, like people do hold on to that, and I think people love having something tangible. So I feel like with the record and vinyl resurgence, that it shows you how much people really like having music physically, whether that is a T-shirt with their favourite band on it, or whether it's a bucket hat or socks or spice mix. You know what I mean? These things, the more creative you are, the more expression it comes across to the people that are engaging with your music. So think outside the box. Don't just limit yourself to like the stuff that everybody does.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll finish up with one final question. So it's now the day of the gig. Mm-hmm. What advice have you got for artists turning up to the venue? What should they be doing?
Turn up on time. Yeah. Don't be late. You only have a certain amount of time for your sound checks built in, and everything has to run to a schedule. And I think people think the schedule can just be kind of, we'll take our time, we'll chill. No, you can't be doing that. You have to make sure that you're showing up on time, you're loading, like try and be as quick as possible for your load-in. That would be like the most important thing. Show up on time.
Be on time, bring what you need, make sure you know what you need in advance. Listen to the sound engineer, they know their venue very well.
Don't argue with them. I mean, you can say that this is how I want my sound to sound, but if someone's saying I cannot put the level up anymore because you're peaking, you're in the red, you have to take that on board, especially if you're like DJing. Don't be pulling that slider all the way up, because there is a master control and it will just be getting brought down, and you'll get so angry at that, but there's a reason why we're doing that. It's so the sound doesn't distort. And that probably goes for more larger venues. I guess the smaller you are, the more you can probably push it. But yeah, don't anger the sound guy.
Yeah, I've been on the other end of that a couple times. I feel with soundcheck, it's quite daunting as an artist and as a promoter, because it's that sort of like period waiting calm before the storm, and yeah, it can be quite anxious. I think sound check is very important though, because it's how you're going to ultimately sound. However, as an artist, I don't like sound check because when I'm up there and I'm sound checking, the room and the quality of the sound doesn't sound exactly how it will when the room is full. And that's something that like I had to get used to, I suppose. And hearing my voice on the mic and stuff like that. And the only way I got used to that is by doing more shows and turning up to sound check and doing the sound check and getting used to it and understanding the terminology of what the turning up the input means and stuff like that. Getting really comfortable, that's going to help you get more comfortable with that and allow you to perform better, ultimately.
And that kind of ties into like try and play in as many different styles and types of venue as possible, because they all sound completely different. So if you've got a lot of glass in a venue, that's going to sound different to if you have a super high ceiling and it's made of wood. And all these things do impact your sound, and it is really important how different it sounds between sound check and the show. You don't realise how much bodies absorb sound. So don't panic if at sound check you're like, this doesn't sound like how it usually sounds, because I guarantee by the time everybody's in and everyone's having a good time, it will sound how you think it does. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are we anything else to add, or anyone? Great. Has anyone got any questions about what we've talked about, or anything that we have missed and not covered? I'm struggling to see, but I don't know.
Hi again. I was just going to ask, so as I kind of said before, we're kind of grassroots promoters. How do you navigate bands that are difficult to work with? Because I think that's definitely, we found there's like, some bands are great. I'm like, I want to keep booking you, you're amazing. And then other bands, I'm like, you're just completely disrespectful and I don't want to work with you again. But the problem is like, they have a really good sound or they're really good music. And I want to book them for the music, but they're not necessarily the best people to work with.
That's a really good question.
Rock and roll.
It's difficult, I guess. It's a case by case basis, right? And you're correct. Like if the music's amazing, you don't want to let that hold you back. But I guess how difficult is difficult? If you're talking like a little bit rude, a little bit slow at replying to emails, that's one thing. But if they're giving you actual hassle and abuse, I don't think that's something worth tolerating, even if the music's great. Personally, it's a case-by-case basis, and you have to kind of learn through experience where the line is for you personally, I would say.
Yeah, think of the pros. You need to weigh up the pros and the cons and to kind of like gauge whether you think it's right to be working with them, and if there's a bit of you that's like, this isn't right and they're not good people, then I don't think you should support them at all, because there's so many people trying to get into music and who are so passionate about it. I don't think there's a need to be that way, and maybe it's portrayed, like the music industry is portrayed in a certain light, and I don't think you trust your intuition and trust your gut on kind of the feeling that you're getting from a band or a musician, and kind of go with it and trust yourself. And it's okay to say no to people. That took me a really long time to learn, and to like self-advocate and to put boundaries in place of what is acceptable and what is appropriate and what is not. You really have to learn how to say no and be upfront and not be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I think working with a lot of hip-hop artists, they can also quite be difficult to work with and manage, but it is a case of managing people, essentially. I think you can only really just assume, say they're being quite slow at replying and not being very detailed and stuff like that, and you have to keep coming back to them to get more out of them. That can be quite frustrating, and it can take a lot of time. But in a way, to combat that, I would be, and essentially my first contact to them would have all the questions that I would need, so they could then spend all the time they needed to give me everything. And I would also give them a deadline for when I need it by. Because then it's the ball's in their park, and it's up to them now to to provide the details. And if they don't, then we're kind of taking steps back and the show's not moving forward, and you'll probably have to think about replacing that act or something like that.
Also, interestingly, just from experience, I wonder if, Lizzie, you'll agree with this or not, I've kind of come to the realization that the artists that are at the very top of their game, and I've been really fortunate to work with quite a few people that are super well known, and what I've found is that they are typically and mostly the nicest people. And there's a reason why, not only are they great musicians, but there's a reason why they've gotten so far. And I think that goes a long way to the kind of A-listers that I've met have all been very, very similar. And it's interesting that when I see kind of maybe bands that are starting out who have got this big chance to play a really big venue that's sold out, the difference in like behaviour and how they act, that's just something that I've kind of always noticed.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I would say the
obviously
same.
there's exceptions to the rule,
There's
right?
always exceptions, but yeah, if you're kind to people for the majority of the time, you'll get that reflected back at you. So
yeah, and you'll go further as well, because no one wants to work with someone that's not nice, you know. So be kind, you know, just be kind and enjoy what you're doing.
We've got time for one more quick question.
I'm kind of just wondering, what would you say is like the best first step in contacting like a promoter or a venue? Would it be like an email or like a real life kind of thing? Like, to look professional, what do you think would be the best thing to do at first to just get in contact, like get your foot in the door?
I would say in person is better, just because you can see each other and you can have a conversation and you can then ask to see the venue. You can do a lot in person. Email, there will be that email back asking for more details, like, okay, what is the acts, what's the lineup, and so on and so forth. So in person is usually better, but obviously not always possible.
yeah, in person's great. Obviously, the opportunities to do that are more limited though. And a lot of times, if you just walk into a venue, the booking team might not necessarily be present in the venue, depending on
Or
what's
if we
happening.
have a busy show that night,
Yeah,
we're
totally.
caught up doing that and dealing with the band and dealing with load
Yeah.
in, sound checks, things like that. It's a really hard one, because also if you're emailing, we get so many emails that it becomes a bit of it's really difficult to like give back tailored responses to people. So I think just kind of keeping at it and not like stopping, and keeping the ambition to like just message people and show up and try and talk to people and try and grow your network. Kind of all the other panels have touched on that. Like communication, it really is key, and finding a network is probably like it's the number one thing, you know.